everyone and welcome back. In this lesson I'm going to show you personal geodatabases. They're really similar to file geodatabases in many ways, but they have a few key differences, so we're going to walk through them. Once again, I'll show you how you can send personal geodatabases, also show you a bit about making and saving queries in personal geodatabases, and a bit about the different limits in personal geodatabases. Okay, let's get started. So just as a refresher, personal geodatabases and file geodatabases look the same. They have the same icon in ArcMap, but they're actually very different storage formats under the hood. File geodatabases are fully an Esri storage format, and personal geodatabases use an old Access format, Microsoft Access, which is a database system. They use an old MDB geodatabase format. And what that is it's a Access 2003 database, and Esri ArcMap adds in a bunch of information that enables it as a spatial database. So it's still a valid Access database, but it is also a geodatabase. And I'll show that to you in just a second. So when we expand them, we see very similar things to what we see in file geodatabases. We have feature classes. We can also store rasters and feature data sets and tables just like we can in file geodatabases. As I said in the last lecture, you might not want to store rasters because they'll fill up your 2 GB file size limit in your personal geodatabase very quickly though. A common workflow I'll use when I need a personal geodatabase is I'll store all of the data that I want to be relational, so all the feature information and all the tables in a personal geodatabase, and then I'll store my rasters in a file geodatabase next to it. So I'll end up with a 2 database system, but it works and I get the personal geodatabase advantages for the feature classes, and I'll show you what those are in just a second. So just like last time, let's take a look at what it takes to send a personal geodatabase. So in Windows, we see instead of the Windows file folder that we see for file geodatabases, we see a Microsoft Access database file. And then we also see a lock file since I have it open in ArcMap. It locks the records in the geodatabase. But we can still open it, and the nice thing is that this is the only file that's necessary if I want to send this to somebody. I can just share this whole file with them. If I have Dropbox or Google Drive or something, I can just share this file and they have all of the information they need to have the whole geodatabase. Whereas with the file geodatabase, remember, we had to zip or compress the whole folder in order to send it to somebody. So I can double click it to open it up because Microsoft Access is registered as the file handler for this. So it means that when I double click it, Microsoft Access intervenes and opens it up. As I said, it's a standard Microsoft Access file, just with some spatial extensions that ArcMap adds in. And when it opens up, I see those special objects. So I see these tables. It organizes them for me and into tables, and my feature classes show up as just tables in Microsoft Access. So I see all these geodatabase specific items, and then it has some tables for selections as well. And then I see my Protected Areas 2015 data set. So let's view that side by side with ArcMap here. And so we see these two items are the same thing. And I can view it in ArcMap, but I can also open up the data table in Microsoft Access here and view it all. And just like in ArcMap, the shape field stores all of the feature information, and then I can see all of the rest of the record information as well by just scrolling over to the right. Now, one thing I should point out is that I couldn't have just created a database within Access and then open it in ArcMap as a spatial geodatabase. If I create a Microsoft Access database and try to open it in ArcMap, it will see tables in it potentially, but it will not be able to use it as a personal geodatabase. I have to create personal geodatabases from within the catalog window here. Only then can I open them in Access and see them as an Access database as well. So why am I showing you Microsoft Access here when we can already view all this data in ArcMap and we can view the feature information? Well, I think Microsoft Access is a great viewing and editing environment for a lot of your data. So if I wanted to change this data here, I could, and it writes the changes immediately for me. So I could say that maybe this was an error, and this one was also, this field here was actually the same here. So I can edit it and that data updates for me. So I can edit really quickly my attribute tables in Access, and I just restored that value. But I can also create queries and relationships here. I can create relationship diagrams between my tables to view how they all relate to each other. And I can also create reports. So it has reports wizards. It can automate reports for me. So I can create all sorts of advanced little applications out of my personal geodatabases so that they're both a data storage mechanism, but also a little bit of an application. And if you're familiar with Microsoft Access already, that's a great little feature to have. And I can also create permanent queries in here. So I can go to the query design view and select the Protect Areas 2015 table and close. And I'm going to just switch it over to the SQL view. You can use this query design editor if you like, but I'm going to switch over to the SQL view. And we're going to say where, let's see, that was, we want the owner name is 0720. And I'll confirm that field name here equals 0720. And now I can run this query. And I get only where that criteria is met. So when I have this query, I can then switch back to the SQL view and make more edits to it and refine it. And then I can save this query so that I can run it repeatedly and view the data this way. So it's almost, in a way, it's like saving a selection where I view the data table, but I can come back to it later, this exact selection all the time. And if things change, I can view it in Access that way. So I'll view it as a data sheet, which is the same as running it. So then I'll save this query and I'll say owner 0720 is the query. And over here on the left side, I get a queries section where I have owner 0720. So I can close this out and I can be browsing my data table, but then if I want to go just subset it immediately to that query that I wrote that's of interest to me, I can double click it and run that query immediately against the live data. Microsoft Access is a subject all on its own, so I'm not going to go deeper than that right now, but just know that there's a lot of power in having a geodatabase that is also an Access database. So I'm going to close out of Access here, and we'll come back in. And I just want to point out one other thing, which is that in Select by Attributes, we get different operators when we are looking at data from a personal geodatabase versus a file geodatabase. So notice these brackets around the field names here. Let's close this out and bring in the California counties layer again and pin that. And if I go to Select by Attributes on, so this is Protected Areas 2015, and if I go to California counties, I don't need field delimiters around them. So if I double click them, it doesn't have that. But for personal geodatabases, I need to surround my fields in brackets. And it's just one of those things where each has different data storage backend engine. And to satisfy those query engines in the personal geodatabases versus the file geodatabases, we have to format our queries slightly differently. And I just want to point out that that's something to get used to. But that's also why I encourage you to use the double-click query builder here, because then you never are wondering if you got your fields right. Because I like to type in queries myself, but I probably would have typed in own name here rather than putting in the brackets around it. And double-clicking saves me from making those mistakes. Okay, that's all I have to show you about personal geodatabases right now. They support many of the same things that file geodatabases do, including feature data sets, but they have a few caveats and a few advantages, namely that they have that 2 GB file size limit, but they are also a fully fledged Access database to use for all your queries and any sorts of little mini applications you want to create in your Access database through reporting and forms and things like that. It's also really nice to be able to send a single file to somebody if you want to share it. I think that they're really great for small projects where you have a lot of data tables or feature classes that you want to relate to each other. They're a great central storage piece to those kinds of projects, which you can then expand with other file geodatabases as you need. One thing to note is that these are going away. So Esri has stated that they're not really going to be supporting these in the long run, and you can't create them right now with an ArcGIS Pro. You can use them, but you can't create them in ArcGIS Pro. So they're sort of becoming a legacy item, but they're being replaced with other options in the long run. They're still useful for now and worth you knowing about, though. Okay, in the next lecture, we're going to learn a little bit about shapefiles. So I'll see you there.